It's been an extraordinary time, actually. It's been an amazing journey, and about 6-7 months in total, 5 programmes, each an hour long. Each was about 4 or 5 weeks filming, with a little break in between.
Indeed.
And it's all over now, and so we're just putting the final touches together and on the programme and the book, and they'll be out really soon. We chose the Arctic for very good reasons. I was very lucky to have been to the Amazon the last time I went away, and I thought that was a really interesting look at what is happening in the world today. And after we came back from the Amazon, we were like, where can we go next? Where else is in the sort of the consciousness of the whole world that people are looking at that's important, that's indicative of what's happening on the global scene? And we couldn't think of anywhere more relevant than the Arctic. And the reason why is because the Arctic, according to the records and the experts, is warming faster than anywhere else on the planet, twice as fast, in fact, than most places. And it's really feeling the effects of global impact, global influence, especially from the industrialised nations like our own. And so we thought that the Arctic was really relevant. And off we went. And I've been to the Arctic before, and I'm famously not massively happy in the cold. I've moved from the UK to go to the Mediterranean. I've headed south. So for me to go north was an undertaking. And I have to admit that initially I wasn't super excited. But I thought that it was important. We really wanted to go and see what was happening up there. And my frivolous notions of concern about my own personal well-being were totally overshadowed by the importance of the messages that we might get. So we headed up north, and initially, I suppose like many people, I had always thought that the Arctic was this sort of pristine, fragile ecosystem separate from the rest of the world that was pretty unaffected by the outside world. And how wrong could I be? You know, everywhere I went, I saw dramatic change, and in fact, the final episode, I talked to the experts in Svalbard, and they really shed very strong light on what is, in fact, a massive amount of impact that the whole of the Arctic region is receiving from the rest of the world. So that's the biggest lesson of all, I think. It's so interesting that the whole climate change, global warming, of course, that's at the back of my mind everywhere I went through the programme. And everywhere I went, I saw dramatic change and listened to testimonials of people, indigenous people often, whose ancestors had lived in that exact environment for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And they were all saying that they were concerned because where they were was changing much quicker than their memory told them had happened before. So what the future holds for the Arctic, I have no idea. I know what the scientists say, but the other thing I've learned is that there's no way any of these computer models can be truly accurate. That's just it's just beyond us. It's so intricate. So I think the trend is that it's going to warm. I think definitely it's going to warm. I think that we are very likely to have ice-free summers in the Arctic, probably in our lifetime. That's going to have a massive impact on trade routes and these sorts of things. I think we're going to be looking for natural resources up there in a way that hopefully might be collaborative, but judging by the forces at play in our world at the moment, is more likely to be competitive. And because no one knows who owns what, who knows what's going to happen there? I think that the Arctic is going to change beyond all recognition, and I think that some of the indigenous peoples who have lived there for so long and who are really important at this stage in the history of humankind, I believe they have so many things to teach us. They are being overrun and having a really hard time at the hands of us, essentially more powerful, dominant cultural forces. So I think that, that there's a lot of potentially really sad things that are going to go on up north, but I don't know. I can't predict exactly these models. These climate models, for example, they're just beyond me. There's so many variables, but certainly it's warm. I think without doubt, when people open up and see Arctic with Bruce Parry, they're like, oh my God, you know, how we can have 5 episodes that's going to be white every time, everything's going to be the same. I mean, what is there up there? And of course most people, myself included for a while, you know, just considered the Arctic to be the ice regions of the polar north. But in fact the Arctic, the line of the Arctic can be drawn in many, many different ways, whether it's above the tree line, whether it's the permafrost areas, or whether it's the Arctic Circle itself. There's lots and lots of different ways of describing what the Arctic is. And we chose one that's quite liberal so that we could have a variety in our programs. And I'm really pleased we did, because we highlight in the programs that there's a massive amount of biodiversity, there's a massive amount of cultural diversity, and geographical diversity. And you know, there's some places we go to. I went, you know, in the middle of our series, we go to Russia, to Siberia, and we're hanging in the coldest inhabited place on the planet, -60, -70 in the winter. And we're there in midsummer, and it's +35. You know, and so that is just those sorts of revelations are really unexpected for many people, I think. And as a result, our program, you know, holds its worth throughout. Every episode is sufficiently different, and every chapter in the book is sufficiently different that there's real lessons to be learned.
Brilliant. Now you came back from Siberia with a suntan, I seem to remember.
Yeah, only our face there, because you know, I mean, like everywhere in the world is different, and people adapt differently to wherever they live. But that place, if you're born there is very little respite in your daily life. You know, we can go to a festival and lie around on the grass and enjoy the sun and take our tops off and you know, go for a swim in the stream. In the summer there, it's teeming with mosquitoes. You just never take your top off. And in the winter it's -60. You don't take your top. You know, it's like it's a tough environment. And I was only there for a month, but you imagine what it's like there all year round. Of course, the people are extraordinary and wonderful and cheerful, and they love their place. But for a visitor, you really have to step up to the mark. It's quite full on. Wherever you go in the world, if you're going off the beaten track, then you know, pay attention to what the indigenous people are doing, because they're so much more switched on than we are. I mean, they're naturally adapted to that environment, and they have a history of being there. So up in the north, I mean, if you're really going into the extremes, and I've had this in previous trips as well. I mean, furs is the only thing that really that you can survive in extremes. If you're climbing Everest, you can do it in modern clothes because you're exercising. If you're sitting on a sledge in -50, being pulled by reindeer, there isn't anything that's warm enough unless you're in the local clothing. It's just, I've tried it with all the best stuff and it's not good enough. So you know, those guys know best. You know, what would I take? Well, wherever I go in the world, I need a knife. Well, you know, I tend to not take much because I'm trying to live the life the way they do. So I'm the worst person in the world to ask that sort of question, because I just kind of go light and live the way they do, and that's the way I learn. Polar bear trousers, my God, the polar bear trousers. I mean, like, don't they look amazing? I mean, they are extraordinary, and how snug to put on, and you know. And there's one photo of me in the book with the sort of like a bluey white cave behind, and I've got a blue parka and these like amazing 2 foot wide legs and these big sort of Uncle Bulgaria feet at the bottom, and they're really extraordinary. Of course, behind that, as we highlight in the book and the film, there is the story of the diminishing polar bear, which is of course incredibly relevant. And you know, the polar bear is almost the most iconic of the northern animals, maybe even all of the animals in the world, about, you know, climate change. And so here we have the polar bear, and then also here we have the Inuit, who historically have hunted them, and they use their skin and fur for clothing. So it just by looking like that, you're opening all sorts of different and interesting stories, and I think that's one of the indications of how things are changing and may have to change even more, as our influence is felt by the local people who are having to adapt as a result. And some of those adaptations they're not very happy with, understandably, and some of those adaptations they might have to accept because of the other things that they're taking from the modern world too. So it's, you know, everything's in the balance up there, and they're really feeling it.
One thing that came across was the food. I think just you make that point, nothing grows. You know,
Yeah.
we obviously have that incredible sort of supermarket scene in Karnak. Do you want to say a little bit about the food? I'm just very short.
I mean, I don't think I hardly saw a vegetable patch in the whole time I was there. I saw one in Canada with my friend Stephen, who had learnt one from his Mountie father, learnt how to grow stuff. But other than that, and they were quite far south. But as soon as you go further north, there's nothing grows. I mean, you can collect berries and mushrooms in certain parts of Russia, and where, you know, and there is always a little bit of something, berries mostly, but for the majority of the year, it's only about meat. And of course, traditionally, especially the Inuit, and also the herders to a degree, the hunting and the meat was everything. It's their clothing, it's their heat, the blubber which they would use to burn and to cook. If they had enough spare, they could use it for cooking too. The tents would be made again from pelts or what have you. The sledges, but made from animals, pulled by animals. I mean, everything. It's all about the human-animal relationship. And so, rather than hunter-gatherers that you might find in the forests of the tropics, these guys were hunters. You know, they were just hunters. And so, vegetarians beware if you want to go on a journey up north. You know, it's all about the meat.
So why have they got such good teeth, the Inuits?
What a great scene! What a great scene! It was really lovely. Rasmus and Mads Ole in that tent. We had such a good time. They were such wonderful people. I adored them, you know, they're honest chaps. And we were just having that great scene where we're cleaning our teeth, and their English was really, really good, and broken, but just good enough that I could just kind of make it out. And I'm like, okay, did you just say that? That's really funny. That's really cheeky, but I love it. So yeah, and why are their teeth so good? Well, because, you know, interestingly, their diet, although it seems like just a lot of whale blubber and walrus blubber and all the rest of it, actually, previously they've had very little coronary heart disease in their history, because there's loads of omega oils and all that sort of stuff in that sort of marine life mammals that they eat. But now that they can't hunt because they can't afford to, they're flying in lamb and beef and stuff from the south. And for the first time in their history, they're beginning to get heart disease and that sort of stuff as a result of the different types of meat. So all I'm saying there is that, you know, it seems really bad that they're just eating all of this sort of like fatty meats, but actually it's proven that that's been incredibly healthy for them in that environment. And the stuff that we're sending up that we seem to think is okay is probably less healthy for them. And the fact that they don't have fruit and veg, well, they seem to have done all right. Weird. Dr. Atkins would be happy with it.